Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am here for my Week 4 LCS overview, analysis, and of course, at the end, my power rankings. A little bit of housekeeping to do. I know I say that probably every episode, but this one, I actually have some stuff to say beforehand. If you've noticed my voice sounding a little bit different here, I talked about this in yesterday's LEC episode a little bit, but I did test positive for COVID. So I am very sick right now. Not sick enough to not make this video. I can still talk, and it doesn't really seem to affect me too much. But if you notice a lack of energy, maybe just a lack of my voice being super enthusiastic, that's really where it's taken most of it out of, is just on my throat. So, I apologize. Hopefully the information in the video is still going to be helpful. And just because I'm not being all super excited all over the place, that doesn't mean it's all going to be a huge issue, but yeah, there's that. And then also, I have to say this is the last video I think I'm going to drop this in. If you did not catch last week's videos, which were my updated player and team power ranking videos for all 4 of the major regions, I would really appreciate it if you went and checked those out. Those are going to be up in the iCard right now. We put a lot of effort into those videos, and so if you would do me real solid if you guys went and checked that out and maybe gave it a like if you enjoyed it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into our Week 4 games. Starting off with Day 1. Day 1 was kicked off with a matchup between 100 Thieves and FlyQuest. And this one was not close at all, and I don't think a lot of people would have expected how this one would have gone. Obviously, coming off of the big break that all these teams had, they had a full week break. We saw in the LEC in particular that some teams probably responded to that week a little bit better than others. Maybe some took a little bit of extra time off, and some definitely scrimmed a little bit more. We might be seeing a little bit of that here in the LCS as well, because this was an absolute slaughter from a FlyQuest team that nobody expected to be as good as 100 Thieves. They obliterated them pretty much from top to bottom. They looked really, really solid here. My player of the game is going to go to Jose Deodo, who was genuinely phenomenal here for FlyQuest. He was controlling the whole map on Viego. This is a pick that I think is relatively overrated in the meta right now, just generally speaking, because, well, I think it's fine. Like, it's a good pick. I certainly don't think it's like a top prio pick or anything like that, but 100 Thieves goes for the super wombo combo comp. You've got the Yasuo support with Senna. You've got the Wukong knockup. You've got the Gragas in the top lane for knockups, and then Abadagi to hopefully do some damage on the Corki, but they're just never able to get anything done here. Takuya's all over the map. Jose Deodo's all over the map. And FlyQuest is really able to get a lead. And 100 Thieves, the best way I could describe it is really just rolls over and dies. There's a play late in the game, I believe it was Soul for FlyQuest, Dragon Soul for FlyQuest, where they pick somebody off. I'm trying to remember who it was. I can't think of it off the top of my head. They pick somebody off, and it's a 4v5, and 100 Thieves is just like, okay, I guess we'll just give Dragon Soul. And they just take it. And FlyQuest is like, okay. And they just win the game. Like, it really felt like 100 Thieves was just not prepared to play the game today, which is definitely frustrating to see from a team that I think has generally had some issues with consistency, especially in the regular season. You really want to see a team like that be able to come back from a break feeling motivated and confident. That was pretty much the opposite we saw from 100 Thieves, but that is exactly what we saw from FlyQuest. Like I said, Jose Deodo is my player of the series here, but I do want to give special shout-outs here to Takuya on the Lissandra, who was pretty much everywhere on the map. I wouldn't say abandoned lane, but really didn't need to be in lane against the Corki. Knew that he was going to get outscaled pretty much immediately, so he was able to make plays elsewhere. And I want to give a big shout out to Aframu on the Lulu here, because, we could talk about Johnson being able to do a lot of damage on the Zeri here, Philip taking like 4 million tower shots over the course of this game, but Aframu does so much for this team, I think, generally speaking, in terms of shot calling. And I think he has become, in my opinion, probably the most underrated player. Maybe not in the world, but certainly close to it, because every single team that he is on is just better because he's on it. And that has been proven over and over and over again. Even when his teams aren't, like, great, they're still better than they would be if they did not have Aframu. And I think that's really got to be worth something. He is a very, very important piece to this FlyQuest team. And they're looking at a 5-3 record. Like, that's top 4 potential. And do I think, outlook-wise, do I think that they're a top 4 team? Probably not. Obviously, that's going to be really, really difficult to break into. But right now, they're playing like it, and they just obliterated one of the top 4 teams. So that's exactly what you want to see. More of this will start to build my confidence a little bit more for that team. As for 100 Thieves, I didn't really talk about it. Who he's my dud of the series here on the Yasuo. This comp was pretty much entirely designed around getting Huhi fed, and they just weren't able to do it. Huhi was super passive. They got camped early game and then just kind of lost. So Huhi's my dud of the game here, but it's not like anybody on this team played well. Abadage just AFK farmed for 30 minutes. FBI was fine. Closer someday, whatever, right? Like, they were whatever. Nobody in the game did anything for 100 Thieves. Outlook-wise for them, like, they're a good team. We know they're a good team, obviously. This is a team that, you know, last year was NA's #1 seed at Worlds, but they have not been playing like it recently. Like, their 5-3 record, I think, is a little bit deceiving because they have not played like a team that has really dominated in the same way that FlyQuest. I think FlyQuest overall in summer so far has looked better than 100 Thieves, but you have to imagine that this team is eventually going to figure it out. Abadage is not going to play like this the entire split. You don't imagine FBI will either. He's actually had a really bad couple of weeks, and so you imagine at some point that they'd be able to pick this back up, but right now it's simply not happening, and until it does, it's going to be hard to have a lot of genuine confidence after an absolute stomp like this. Moving on to the second game here of day one, we had Dignitas taking on Evil Geniuses. Evil Geniuses picking up another win. They continue to kind of roll through the LCS after their, up and down MSI performance, I'll say. But yeah, I mean, they've come back to North America with a renewed chip on their shoulder. This is a team, of course, that struggled in regular season last split. That is certainly not happening in summer here. They are blowing through the competition. They're 7-1, and they looked all right here. This went 37 minutes, and you could definitely feel it. This is a very, very slow game from Dig and EG. Neither team really wanting to do much, and that's fine. Both teams deciding to just kind of farm it up. Gamsu got a lot of attention early in the game here with the Shyvana top, which I think a lot of people like. I'm one of them. I think it's a pick that can certainly work. He gets a little bit ahead on it. Impact, wasn't ready for a couple of the ganks that he got early. Dies a couple times. Gamsu gets ahead. A lot of people are flaming him for building full tank here on Shyvana. Like I've said in previous videos, I think it's explainable. I think full tank Shyvana is actually super, super oppressive and super difficult to kill, especially if you don't have a ridiculous backline like ADC. Unfortunately, they have a Jinx, which does relatively well into full tank Shyvana, and so it becomes a little less pertinent. But I'm not under the, impression that you have to build Demonic on Shyvana in order for her to be really successful from ahead. So yeah, I don't hate it. Gamsu gets ahead. They aren't really able to do anything about it. Jojo plays his ass off in the late game team fights, and EG's able to pick up the win after a pretty boring mid game. And that's really all it was, right? EG played well. They played slow. You have a Gangplank, you have a LeBlanc, you have a Jinx. You're going to scale. You're going to scale. Even with the Poppy pick, everybody knows that I'm a huge fan of. Even with the Poppy, I really think that you're going to outscale eventually, as long as you don't let the game get too out of hand, and they knew that, so they just played really safe. Dignitas didn't have the gall to challenge them on that. Their comp definitely needs to get a little bit more ahead. The Shyvana wants a lot of gold. The Viego needs a lot of gold if he's going to do anything into Poppy. And the Sylas the Sylas doesn't have much to do in this comp anyways, so then you're just kind of relying on Zeri and then Luluwalt to kind of carry your team comp, and it just wasn't going to happen here. So, you just get to that point where you're outscaled. Jojo's my player of the game. His mechanics are pretty unreal. There's really no other way to put it at this point. You could argue that he has become EG's best player. I think Inspired will argue that. I think Vulcan will certainly argue that as well. But Jojo, I think, has become their most consistent carry in terms of putting resources on and just having him win in team fights. I think Jojo's just become really, really phenomenal at it. The LeBlanc game here, a champion that I think is relatively underpowered right now, was really, really, really disgusting to watch. Able to blow up people pretty much instantaneously, even from even. And his positioning was just nearly perfect, dodging every single skill shot. He was phenomenal in this one. Wasn't the only one, obviously. I thought Impact, after a really bad early game, honestly came back and did all right, and then so did Inspired. Vulcan continues to be really good at Renata. What else is new? But for Dignitas, I think, they're just not good, right? Like, this is just a team that has no direction. Blue is going to get my dud of the game here. He got outskilled by Jojo, especially late game. On Sylas, you really have to be ready to position and to fight, and he certainly wasn't willing to do that in this game, so he's going to get my dud of the series. But honestly, there were quite a few people that deserved it. The only person I think that you could say had a relatively okay game was, like I said, Gamsu in the early game. I thought was relatively all right here on the Shyvana. He just wasn't able to translate that into any sort of actual success after a certain point. So yeah, not a great look from Dignitas. They're just a team that, like, even with a lead in this game, it never felt like they were going to win because they're so bad from ahead. Like, they have no idea how to close. They have no idea how to be proactive. They haven't shown any ability to do that all year long. The only game that I felt they really did that in was the one where they obliterated TSM, and I feel like everybody obliterates TSM, so, like, whatever. But, yeah, I mean, really, this Dignitas team is not good. There's really no other way to put it. They are not a good League of Legends team, and this, again, I think proves that over and over. So, yeah, I mean, outlook-wise, not good for Dig. Certainly not good for Dig. But a good win for EG, if not the most impressive, win that they've ever had, because they just kind of sat there, waited for their champs to get online, and then won a team fight. But at the end of the day, if that's your win con, that's your win con. So you played towards it. You would have hoped Dig would have been a little more proactive in trying to stop that, but shout out to EG for getting that and being able to secure the win and close out the game. Moving on to the third game here of day one. We had one of the most classic matchups in LCS history. We had TSM taking on Cloud9. Cloud9 winning. They do that a lot recently, especially over TSM. TSM ain't doing a lot of winning, but we do get to see the new roster. This is the first TSM game with the brand new roster. Huni out, Soul in, Tactical out, Instinct in, and Mia out, Chime in. Yeah, it looked alright. We'll get to it in a bit, but let's get to Cloud9 first. Fudge is really good sometimes. We're seeing Gangplank be picked pretty high prio pretty much everywhere in the world, but most especially in the western regions. We saw it in the LEC quite a bit this past weekend, and we're seeing it here in the LCS as well. Fudge able to pick up the Gangplank here and really just kind of goes to town. I would consider Shyvana a relatively good matchup for against the Gangplank. I think Shyvana does relatively well as a full tank to just be able to kind of shut down what GP wants to do for the most part, but when you're this good at GP, it honestly doesn't particularly matter, especially when the mid laner keeps roaming top and dying. So, yeah, I mean, not the best game for Soul, but really, like, this was Fudge being really, really good and taking advantage of pretty much everything that he was given here. He's my player of the game. He was really, really phenomenal. He was doing 8 billion quadrillion damage on the Gangplank. I know a lot of people talk about the crit versus Bruiser Gangplank debate. I think there are pros and cons to both. I think in this matchup, going crit is definitely more risky because you're going into a Shyvana, and if they don't run your lane over and over again, like, you're not going to scale nearly as hard as you would want to normally, because you're really not going to have a ton of opportunities to kill Shyvana over and over again. Typically, you wouldn't, at least. But in this game, obviously, it was different, so once you get ahead, you obviously go crit. But yeah, just a good game for Fudge in general. Good game for Blabber as well. On the Volley Bearer pick that I'm pretty critical of, or I wasn't. I was kind of anti-critical of early in the year, but I feel like I've changed my tune just a tad bit, just because I've seen other junglers just do what Volley Bearer does better. I do like Volley in this team comp quite a bit more, because I like the Kalista Amumu with Volley. I certainly think that's a strong engage, and you can really focus on diving bot lane with that. Not that they really had to, because, top got so fed, but in theory, I think it's good. Literally the only player on this team that I thought had a really rough one here was Jensen, who really felt like he was, at times, playing for the enemy team. I think that's not going to be too much of a surprise to anybody who watched the game, but, yeah, I mean, Jensen had some plays here on LeBlanc that were just like, okay, not really sure why you did that, buddy. He was a huge reason why TSM even had a chance in this game, so not exactly sure what was going on there for him, but everybody else on the team I thought did relatively fine, like I said, especially Fudge and Blabber. As for TSM, again, first game with their new roster here. How did the newbies play? They played fine. I really don't think they were the issue. Maple's going to get my dud of the game here. He just kept going top and dying to the Gangplank over and over again. Not really sure what was happening there. I don't know if that's being tilted out of your mind or just like feeling like you have to make a play somewhere else because you know you can't really fight the LeBlanc, even though as Ari, I'm pretty sure you can fight the LeBlanc. But he just kept going top and he kept dying, and it's like, okay, sure. That's fine. So he's going to get my dud of the game here. Poor Soul was kind of the person who had to suffer the most for that, as he was full tank Shyvana playing against a fed Gangplank and was really not going to be able to do anything at that point in the game. So he was out of it. Instinct and Chime were whatever. Instinct, I thought, played relatively well in terms of his positioning, just super passive. But Sven was very aggressive here on Chime, and he was getting punished for that. Not really his fault entirely. The game was pretty out of the way at that point, but it is what it is. This TSM roster, I said in my player ranking video that I do think it could be an upgrade, and that I really do think that there is a chance that, like, this team comes in and has just better cohesion, but if Maple plays like this team is not getting any better. This team is still a bottom 2 to 3 team in the league, and that's got to be disappointing for TSM. Obviously, bottom 3 they'll take because at least they'll make playoffs. But at the end of the day, this is an organization that would typically not accept anything other than top 4, top 5, right? So for them to be barely clinging on to maybe the 8th seed, I feel like has to be an absolute disaster for them. But this game certainly doesn't help their prospects, at least in my opinion. As for C9, they're a good team. I don't know if they're a great team. They're a good team, though. They are pretty hit or miss, especially in games like this where, you watch Jensen play and he's, completely running it. I feel like the Jensen that we're getting is very similar to 2021 Jensen, rather than, 2019, 2020, 2018, whatever. Jensen, where he would just have these games where he's just not good. And that's kind of what I'm feeling like we're getting this year out of him. I'm not sure that's a huge positive, but Fudge has been a pretty good carry for this team. And like I said, I think Berserker and Sven are getting better every single week. And if they can continue to do that and continue to make this team better, they should theoretically be one of the top 4 teams in the region. This win is good. It's not the most unbelievable win of all time, but I'm sure that after some of the games that C9 has had, they'll take this one. Moving on to the 4th game here of day 1. We had certainly an interesting one between Immortals and Counterlogic Gaming, CLG. CLG does pick up the win, so congrats to them for that, but it certainly wasn't quite as clean as you would want it to be. Some of the members who were clean, though, what you are impressed by here is going to be the bottom lane for CLG, which just continues to feel like they improve every single week. Luger and Poom were really, really good, especially Poom on that Alistar. He is going to get my player of the game here. He was really, really important towards keeping this team in it towards the end of this game, and keeping Immortals at bay even when they had a gold lead, which was the most of this game. Most of this game, Immortals was up. Not that they were really doing anything with it. It was mostly CLG being super anti-proactive, and Immortals was actually able to get a lead, which is something that I feel like I haven't really been able to say at all this year, but yeah, they were able to get a lead, and then CLG just got the perfect teamfight wombo combo here. Alistar, Gragas, and then finally Palafox on the Yasuo doing something, and they were able to win the game off of that pretty much by themselves. Luger was doing his absolute best to keep them in the game before that. He was doing a relatively good job, but really, it was Luger and Poom that I think had CLG in this game at all in the first place. The fact that they were able to win it, I think, is almost entirely on them in the bottom lane. And like I said, most specifically Poom. I do want to look at Palafox just a little bit here, because this is someone who I have been trying to hype up over the course of the season, but he'll have games like this where it's really difficult to hype him up after a game like this, where you have a comp that is entirely designed around Yasuo, very similar to what he had earlier for 100 Thieves. You have the Gragas jungle, you have the Alistar knockup, right? You have Kalista ult. You have so many things here that are designed to help get Palafox ahead, and I think at 25 minutes, he's 0, 0, and 0. And that is just not okay. You can't be that. And yeah, eventually we get that 4-man knockup in that penultimate team fight, and he does an absolute boatload of damage, and they win the game, and hoorah, that's awesome, excited for them. But at the same time, this game could have been so much easier if Palafox and Contracts had actually been making plays together, rather than Palafox just playing super scared for the first couple minutes, and letting Power of Evil really do whatever he wanted in that lane. So yeah, honestly, not the best game here from CLG, certainly not a perfect game, but a win's a win, and you're really going to be happy with how your support played. As for Immortals, yeah, this was not a particularly great game. It's not the worst game you've ever played. To go from consistently being almost perfect gamed to, actually having a kill lead when you lose, I think is a positive. They had a lead for most of this game, off of the back of, I think Power of Evil was super active across the map. Ignar was doing some interesting things. Revenge had a pretty good top lane matchup here as the Gangplank into the Gwen, which I think can be positive for the Gangplank, depending. But at the end of the day, they couldn't come away with the win. They get 4-man knock-up in that last fight. Knocked up? That feels wrong to say, but whatever. You get 4-man knocked up in that final fight there, and it's just game over. All of them, I guess, just forgot to dodge, and they lose for it, and it sucks. I had to pick a dud of the game here. really, the dud of the game was everyone. And I think realistically, you could give this to Palafox if you really wanted to, because again, 0-0-0 at 25 minutes for a Yasuo in a Yasuo comp is like unacceptable in pro. But at the end of the day, he was still a big reason why they won that final team fight. So for me, it's going to go Lost. He didn't really play that bad. In fact, he had kind of an okay game, but I don't think anybody in this game was like obnoxiously bad. It was really just, I don't know. It was really like he got caught out when he shouldn't have. He walks into that final knockup, and if he doesn't do that, they might not lose the game. So for me, it's going to go Lost. I wouldn't take that one too seriously. This is probably the weakest dud of the game I've given out in any region all year long. He really wasn't even that bad. He's just the one that unfortunately has to get it because nobody in this game actually made plays. I will say positive-wise, like I said for Immortals, shout out to Power of Evil, shout out to Ignar, the two players that I think have had experience on this team actually winning games. They did kind of show up here. The Ahri matchup into Yasuo can be pretty good for both sides, honestly, kind of a skill matchup. And Power of Evil was doing a lot more with the pressure early game than Palafox was. Ignar was doing some good stuff across the map as well as the Nautilus, basically keeping Contracts from actually being able to make a ton of really dangerous plays. And like I said, Revenge had some good moments in the top lane. This was probably one of Immortals' better showings all year long. Outlook-wise, I don't think it changes much. This is still a really bad team that, you know, you have to win this game. Like, not being able to win this game shows that you are a bottom team, just period, because any other team in the league wins this, but they're unable to win this. So, yeah, Immortals still sucks. There's really not much else to say on that, even if some of the players and, you know, the scoreline do show that they are making some level of improvement. This is still not, like, a great game for them. And then for CLG, like, this is certainly not the best win they've ever had. Certainly not the most convincing win they've ever had, but a win's a win. You're super above 500 now, which you're going to be super excited about. 5-3 is a super good record for this point in the season, considering where you thought you would be and where you were in spring. So very good for that. You love the development that your bot lane is making. Poom continues to grow every week. I think Luger is a really underratedly good AD carry. Dokla has come in and stabilized a lot in the top lane. If you can get your jungle mid to kind of get on board and continue to grow along with the rest of this team, I think CLG is going to continue to be a team that surprises a lot of people throughout the rest of the year. That brings us to our fifth and final game here of day one of Week 4 LCS action. And that game was, of course, Team Liquid taking on the Golden Guardians. TL picking up a win here, even if it wasn't particularly clean. It should have been, though, after this early game. A pretty good early game here. I guess you could say that might be a little bit of an understatement. And just a little bit of trouble closing it out, but we'll get to that. TL picks up a needed win here. Not that they've really been too, you know, dire in terms of how their season has gone. Obviously, they're still 6-2, but they certainly haven't looked like the world beaters that everybody wants them to be so far. And the early game here really showed, I think, the potential of what this team is capable of putting out. Santorin with probably the biggest jungle gap I've seen in quite a long time in the first 5 to 10 minutes of this game. Around 8 minutes, it really felt like this game was over. Santorin was just everywhere on this map, killing Pride Stalker, killing a Blaze Olive, like being a nuisance everywhere. Like, this was a problem for Golden Guardians to deal with, and it really felt like at that point the game was just done, dusted, over with. This was going to be another one of those 100 Thieves FlyQuest games where the team slowly bleeds out and we just have another free win here to end the day. But Golden Guardians kept fighting, which I think was valiant. Obviously, Team Liquid did a little bit of trolling towards the end of this game. You have 3 inhibitors down, 5 members up, and you almost lose the team fight. And it's insane how that almost happens. We get a meme face out of Bjergsen at the end of this game that I hope will be used for the rest of time. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's really funny. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, just an entertaining game all around. Analysis-wise, TL looked so good in the early game. Obviously, so much thanks to Santorin that this has got to be a positive sign. Santorin's clearly my player of the game here. He was genuinely perfect through the first 8 or so minutes of this game. He has these games sometimes, especially on his champs like Volibear and Trundle and, you know, things like that, where he's just like, oh my god, he's the best jungler in the region. Sometimes he doesn't have these games, and it's not like they happen all the time, but this was a game where that very much felt like, oh my god, like, he's just the best jungler in the region when he plays like this. Nobody's going to be able to touch him when he is playing like this, and it very much felt like that. Bjergsen had a good game on the Ori as well. Some really good shockwaves, especially towards the end there. But, yeah, I mean, honestly, what people are going to take away from this, deservedly or not, is how difficult it was for TL to close out this game. And yes, that's very funny, and it's definitely something worth taking away, but I don't know. At the end of the day, it's really not that consequential. They were so far ahead that they felt like they could just brute force themselves over and over again into that Nexus, and eventually it worked. So, you know, sure, whatever. You get the win. I'm not going to criticize them too hard. There's been so much bad play in the LCS this year, and even this week, that sure, you want to just run your face into the Nexus over and over again until you finally kill it. That's fine. You did that. Golden Guardians, though, like I said, they got really outclassed in the first couple of minutes, especially Pride Stalker. He's going to be my dud of the game here. Unfortunately, it was just, like I said, a pretty big jungle canyon here from Santorin. Pride Stalker was on the receiving end of that, just wasn't nearly on the same level. Not a good game from him, but if there's something to take away from Golden Guardians here is that they did not take the 100 Thieves route of just laying over and dying. They wanted to play this game out, and they did. They kept it relatively interesting, obviously, doing everything they can here to stay in it. They knew they had the Kog'Maw scaling eventually, and they were actually able to do quite a bit of damage later in this game, especially, like I said, when TL was trying to close. I actually think give it another 5 or 10 minutes or so, Kog'Maw might be online enough for you to actually make a difference here, but at the end of the game, at the end of the day, I should say, they were just too far behind in the early game. There was really no way that even with the comp that scaled as hard as theirs, that they were going to be able to come back from this, unless TL just played so passive and boring, which is like the opposite of what they did. They just ran it down, so yeah, I mean, really, at the end of the day, Golden Guardians did everything they could have after a pretty horrendous start, but there was really nothing you could do after going down that much. As for the outlooks of these two teams, Golden Guardians is fine. Like, they continue to be just a good team. Like, not a great team. A team that's probably, like, I think I have them at number 7 in my power rankings. That's probably about where they're going to be. They're better than the bottom crop of teams. They're better than Immortals. They're better than Dignitas. Better than TSM, right? But they're not quite as good as that, like, top 6 or top, upper echelon of mediocre teams like FlyQuest or even like a CLG. Like, I just don't think they're quite on that same level, so they definitely still have some stuff to prove. Not the worst game of all time for them, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really change much. Team Liquid's going to be happy to pick up a win. Their record continues to look good, even if their play continues to look suspect. Santorin looks amazing in this game. Really, with TL, it's not going to be about how they look now. It's going to be about how they look in playoffs. We've always said that about TL. This is a team that has the talent to be able to dominate this region. It's just about whether or not they do it. Right now, they are winning, even if they don't look dominant. Hopefully, they can turn that into confidence that shows them that they can be more dominant and beat anybody in the region, because that's the kind of TL I want to send to Worlds, and fingers crossed we eventually get that. This was not that in this game, but, for the fun factor, honestly, this was significantly more entertaining than a stomp. Moving on to Day 2 in Week 4 LCS action. We kicked off Day 2 with a matchup between FlyQuest and TSM. And I think a lot of people would have expected FlyQuest to come away with this one, especially after how they played earlier in the week. But no, it is the new and improved roster of TSM that is able to pick up their first win in quite a while here in the LCS. A desperately needed win off of the back of some really good plays from their new players. Honestly, that's really what it was in this one, was their 3 new players stepping up and arguably being the 3 most important players in the game. Player of the game easily has to go to Chime here on the Rakan. Chime is someone who I've actually been very complimentary of. If you guys watch my Academy videos, which honestly I know a lot of you don't, but for those of you who watch my Academy videos, you know I'm actually pretty high on Chime and how he's played over the past like 6 or so months. I think he's really improved a lot as not only a player, like in terms of expanding his playstyles from just being good on a couple of champions to being good on a lot of champions, but he's gotten really smart in terms of shot calling. I think that layer of his game has really stepped up a lot, at least from what we've seen. And he was really, really phenomenal here on the Rakan. Obviously, we know him for the Thresh, we know him for the Bard. Here he is on the Rakan, and he really proved that he has a complete mastery of this champion, jumping in, creating so much for this Zeri to do pretty much whatever she wanted to do, and then hopping out with maybe 50 HP left. Really just a fantastic understanding of the limits that this champion has available to it, and what he's able to do with it. Obviously, Chime being phenomenal is going to be my player of the game, but you got to give credit to Instinct as well for being able to capitalize on it. He's come up and he's actually had 2 really solid games here to kick off his LCS career. This is obviously someone who I was very harsh on in Academy, because I didn't think he played particularly well. Not that he was awful. I don't think he particularly made a ton of mistakes, but really, he was someone who wasn't making plays. He was very passive. He played very scared. And I wasn't a huge fan of that kind of play style, especially for Academy. And he comes up here to LCS, and he gets partnered up with Chime, who he's really never played with before, and those two seem to have some pretty good bot lane chemistry because they obliterated Johnson and Aframu in this game, which is a huge accomplishment. That's, you know, I was hyping up Johnson and Aframu as one of the better bot lanes in the region, so for Instinct and Chime to come in and just be a huge power point of the map, I think is a positive for TSM. And then also Sol here in the top lane on the Gnar was able to get a lot of really good engages, especially later in the game. Was able to take a matchup that is positive here as the Gnar into the Sejuani, and was able to kind of scale that out of control. I don't want to take away what Spica and Maple were able to do in this game, especially Spica on the Xin Zhao, which is a tough pick to win on, but he won on it anyways. But Sol, Instinct, and Chime were really the three that I think stood out the most for TSM in this game, which I think is a huge positive for them. As for FlyQuest, obviously you're going to be super disappointed getting pretty much blasted by TSM here. This was not a close game. And a lot of that came down to the fact that bot lane just didn't play particularly well. Aframu's going to get my dud of the game here. He did not even participate in a kill. No kills or assists for Aframu in this game, and you could tell it on the Rift. Like, it was a massacre. He was nowhere to be found. Johnson wasn't very good. Takuya wasn't very good. Jose wasn't very good. Philip wasn't very good. Nobody on this FlyQuest team was good. There's really no other way to put it. I don't want to harp on the players too much, because sitting here and saying that one played that much worse than any of the others, I think is just not the point, right? Really, the point is that them as a team were just completely outclassed, I think, in every aspect by TSM here, which is not a great look. This is a FlyQuest team that we know drops games to bad teams randomly. Obviously, they destroy a very good team earlier in the week, so it's not the best to see them just drop another one here, but at the same time, I'm not pulling the trigger on calling them complete frauds just yet. I still think they have a chance to be, you know, one of the better, more interesting teams come playoff time, but just right now I very much have some concerns with the consistency of FlyQuest, mostly because you still have major question marks in the top lane, and even with Takuya being like a superstar, like him getting outplayed here by Spica and Maple, I think is definitely questionable. So yeah, I definitely have some question marks with FlyQuest outlook-wise. I'm not sure that they're like guaranteed to be a top 4 or so team. I know a lot of people want to put them in that Worlds conversation right now. I'm certainly not quite there with this team just yet. I need to see a bit more, but, you know, they're on their way. That's what I'll say with them. They're on their way. As for TSM, this was one of the most must-needed victories they could have possibly had, especially because it was the new guys showing up. So, yeah, I mean, this is exactly what you want to see. You hope that this team, with the new roster changes, can just be a better version of what it was for most of the season so far. That's what you're hoping and praying. And in this season, or in this game, I should say, I almost said this series. In this game, you were proven that that is definitely a realistic possibility for this team. Moving on to the second game here of day 2, we had CLG, Counterlogic Gaming, taking on 100 Thieves. And 100 Thieves definitely with a little bit of a bounce back performance after their very, very non-existent, really, if we're being honest, showing on day 1 of week 4 here. They look much, much better in this game. A lot of pressure and definitely a game plan going into the game, which I really did like and enjoy. They clearly saw the Fiora in the top lane of the enemy team, and they said, we want to punish that over and over and over and over again. And yeah, it was a strategy, and they certainly went and tried to execute on it. Closer was basically top lane 24/7 in the early game, and while they honestly really didn't get a lot until Abadage came up and pretty much secured a lot of those top lane kills in 3v1 dives, they actually didn't have to give anything up for them, because we'll get to that in a little bit. But it is an interesting strategy here to just kind of say, okay, we're going to pick one lane and we're going to abuse that lane over and over and over again, and it's going to be top. We're going to make sure this Fjord is not going to head, can't side lane against us in the late game. We don't want the 1-3-1 to even be a realistic possibility. And we're going to get Abadage super fed. And that's exactly what happened. Abadage's had a really rough season, I think, in 2022 so far, at least comparatively to, like, what he was last year for 100 Thieves when he joined. But this was a reminder of how good he can be when he is given resources. He's going to be my player of the game here. He was really the X factor for 100 Thieves in this one. Not to say that Someday and Closer weren't also very important. I think you could give it to Closer. Realistically speaking, I thought he had a really good game here on the Poppy, a pick that we know he's very good at, a pick that we know I'm a huge fan of. But at the end of the day, Abadage was the one who was like pushing the team over the top with these plays on the Sylas. Was able to get a lot of really good ultimates off in this game, and that's really your job as Sylas, is to go in, make sure that the enemy team doesn't get to do anything that they really want to do here, and then use their own best tools against them. And that's exactly what happened for Abadage. He was really, really phenomenal here, but like I said, so were Closer, so were FBI, I'm sorry, so was Someday. Someday, Closer, and Abadage were the three that I think really showed off the most. FBI and Hui were fine. They just weren't the focal point of the team, which, again, it's fine. You know, there's no shame in being weak side for one game. As for CLG, poor Dokla. First of all, happy birthday, Dokla. Got to play this game on his birthday. That's great. He got camped to absolute high hell and oblivion in the top lane. And honestly, you sitting at home might be like, oh, that's a good thing, right? Like when top gets camped, that means you just get every dragon, right? Well, yeah, normally I would agree with you on that. And especially when Dokla is top lane, like the 1v2s are happening, you've got the Gnar, the Poppy, and he's not even dying. He's absorbing, he's soaking up all of this pressure. He's doing a genuinely phenomenal job. He's forcing them to bring up mid lane to make those kinds of plays. So now you have a 4v2 on the bot side of the map where you can just essentially get whatever you want there. Dragons, the enemy jungle, you could, dive bot lane, whatever you wanted to do on that side of the map is yours, but they don't do any of that. They actually don't do anything. So that's got to be very frustrating. For me, the dud of the game here has to go to Contracts for that reason alone, because at the end of the day, like, this is one of the least inspiring jungle performances I've ever seen. This was such an easy trade to make here, of saying, okay, this is like the most basic bronze level trade of if they are all top lane and Dragon is up, we can take Dragon. But Contracts didn't want to do that. I don't know what the fear was. I don't know if he just plays with minimap off. Like, I don't know. This was one of the worst games of jungle that I've seen in a very, very, very long time. Because at the end of the day, he didn't do anything to help his team. He actively caused his team to lose this game. I'm not saying they would have won no matter what or anything like that, but he actively looked at the situation and just did not want to do anything positive for it. A very bad game from Contracts, someone who has honestly had a pretty bad year so far, coming back to the LCS. I don't know, I'm starting to lose confidence that he's an LCS player. And I don't really want to say that because, again, I like Contracts and he's such a good personality and, for the league and everything. But at the end of the day, like, if he's going to play like this, you can't justify starting him. You just can't. Hopefully, you have, something to show him or to give him or to motivate him, because this was just a nothing performance. This was so lackluster. And I feel bad for Dokla because Dokla honestly played really, really solid for CLG in this one. But outlook-wise, CLG continues to, I don't want to say disappoint, but they won earlier in the week in a game that they really shouldn't have won, and they lost here in a game that was winnable for them. So I don't really know. Every team in NA is really hard to judge right now because none of them are particularly great. Like, it's really just EG and then the rest. And so for me, like, they're in that quadrant of like FlyQuest and, I don't know, Golden Guardians, teams like that. I think they're kind of around there, but I don't know if they really have the potential to break into the top, 4 or whatever, especially if Contracts is going to play like this all year long. As for 100 Thieves, this is a bounce-back win that you absolutely needed. They came into this game with a clear game plan, and they executed on it. And it's good to see a bounce-back from a player who's really been struggling, probably the player on this team who has been struggling the most this year in Abadage. It's very, very good to see him have a good game. You're really hoping this team can kind of continue to improve as the year goes on, because this is team, I mean, if they don't make Worlds, it's a disappointment. So, this kind of win is necessary, but at the end of the day, even if it's a necessary win, you're going to be happy that you got it either way. Moving on to the third game here of day 2. We had a battle between two of the top teams in the standings. Of course, I am talking about Evil Geniuses taking on Team Liquid, and EG with a pretty dominant win here, continuing their reign atop North America, at least for now. They continue to look like the best team in the entire region, off of the back of pretty much everybody on their team just stepping up. I know I said earlier in the week that it was like, Inspire, JoJo, Vulcan, even Impact at times. I've really hyped up on this channel. Danny had a rough MSI. He has bounced back pretty tremendously so far in summer, and this game is a prime example of why. You put him on the Ezreal here, you give him a lot of leeway with this team comp to be the one that is in charge and with the keys in his hand to carry the game, and he absolutely does it. His Ezreal has always been completely and utterly disgusting. In my opinion, it is clearly his best champion. And you give him a Yuumi, you give him Lissandra, you give him Gnar engages, and he's just going to win the game, and he did here. Danny is my player of the game. He was phenomenal for Evil Geniuses here. Just continued to be everything that you need in like a main carry, which obviously if he's giving you that, and you can put JoJo on someone like Lissandra, and JoJo obviously is a very good supportive mid laner as well. He's just known as a carry. JoJo has a really good game on the list. You have Impact engaging, Inspired on the Viego, Vulcan always attached to Danny. Like, this is a really, really difficult comp to stop if you're pretty much any team in the league when Danny is playing like this. So, big shout out to him. It was a huge bot gap, in my opinion, in this game. And EG definitely took advantage of that. But that kind of brings us to Team Liquid, doesn't it, huh? Where, when I say it's a pretty huge bot gap, that doesn't just mean that Danny and Vulcan played really well. It means that Hans and Core did not. And I feel like this is becoming a little bit of a trend for Team Liquid. When this team loses, it's often because of this bot lane. And that's not, I think, what anybody would have expected going into the year. I'm not sure whether Hans has regressed a lot, whether Core has regressed a lot, or if it's just the fact that these two just don't have a lot of synergy together. I'm definitely leaning towards the latter of those three. But at the end of the day, this bot lane doesn't particularly work in the way that you would want them to. Both of these players should be the best players in their role. There really is no exceptions to that. Hans should be the best ADC in North America. Core should be the best support in North America. Neither has been so far this year. Honestly, neither has really even been that close. I know I still ranked Core as my number one support, but that's because it's Core, and he's the best support to ever play in the region. So I have faith that he will eventually turn it around, but if you're asking me about how he's played so far in 2022, he's certainly not been that. Hans, at best, has probably been a middle-of-the-pack AD carry, which is definitely not what you wanted when you brought him over from Rogue this past offseason. So definitely some problems there. Definitely not the only problems. You counterpick the Gnar with the Aatrox for Bwipo. I get it, Bwipo's like a bruiser player, and his champion pool, quite frankly, we've always known is just not ginormous. He's really good on a small selection of champions that are his own. And it typically doesn't matter if they're meta or not because he can play them so well. His Aatrox got brutalized in this game. Aatrox is not a pick that I would consider very good right now, and it did not work here at all. Credit to Bjergsen, he tried his best here, and Santorin on the Volibear as well, to do anything in this game, but they never had a shot. Bot lane was gapped too hard, and Bwipo was really nothing in the top lane. When you're fighting a 2v8, it becomes difficult, especially when you're Volibear and Zilean, two champions that just can't carry games like that. So, not a great look. Outlook-wise for TL, like, this is the concerning part, right? Of when we were talking about TL, their record looks good, but it doesn't necessarily show on tape. It's because of stuff like this, where even when they're playing okay, like, this bot lane's not living up to expectations. Bwipo is not living up to expectations. The team that everyone thought that they were going to be getting here with Team Liquid so far this year just has not shown up yet. I still hold firm true that if that team does show up, that they'll be the best team in North America, but every game, I believe less and less of that will ever happen. I don't think this bot lane will ever have the synergy that we want. I'm not sure Bwipo is ever really going to be the carry top laner, or even just the stable force that we need him to be. Really, a lot of times that this team has won, it's because Bjergsen's kind of put them on his back. So, we'll see. Obviously, hopefully TL can turn it around. I want, as a North American League of Legends fan, and just as a League of Legends fan in general, I want the best possible version of this Team Liquid roster. Unfortunately, I think the reality of what that best possible version is unfortunately just a lot lower than what the expectation for that reality was. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with Team Liquid. EG right now, they're the best team in North America, and it's not even particularly close. So the only team I have any sort of actual confidence that they could actually make some waves against some better teams in other regions. For me, they are easily the number one team in North America right now, and hopefully the MSI performance gave them the confidence that they needed in order to go out and, level up. Really, obviously going 0-6 against G2 wasn't the best showing in the world, especially with what G2 is showing in the LEC right now, but hopefully that experience made EG a better team, and when they hopefully go to Worlds this season, hopefully they can show up and be a better version of that, because right now they're the only team in North America I have any sort of remote confidence in. Moving on to the fourth game here of day 2. We had another upset. This one I'm very excited to talk about. This one, of course, being Cloud9 taking on Immortals. And Immortals picking up a win? I'm sorry, excuse me. Immortals won a game and against Cloud9. What a huge, huge win for the Immortals army. Love that for all 4 of them. They must feel so excited right now. Jokes aside, Immortals actually played pretty well in this one. I really like their draft. It's the first thing I want to talk about. Not to say that it's the only good thing about the game for them, but I really, really like this draft. A couple of really bold picks by C9 here, most notably the Blind Azir. I think Blind Azir is just pretty unacceptable, and it's very easily counterable, like we saw here. Corki is just such a free lane into Azir, not only early, but late as well. Like, there's really no point in the game where you can do anything as Azir into Corki, and we just saw that. Really like that from Immortals here. Also, Kalista Nautilus, like something that we are kind of moving away from, I think, in terms of full global presence. Your Kalista partners tend to be a little bit more proactive, I think, than Nautilus right now, but at the same time, like, this still works, and Ignar's still a really good Nautilus player. Lost actually had a really phenomenal game here on the Kalista, one of his best of the year so far. He's probably been the player that I think has been the most consistent for Immortals this year so far, and he had another really solid one here, but of course it's a good matchup into Aphelios Braum, lane that I think is wildly overrated right now. But player of the game for me, of course, has to go to Power of Evil on this Corki. I mean, this is a pick that obviously we know he's really good at. He's played it a lot. He played it a lot last split too. He showed why in this game. He was really, really good. He was just much better than Jensen early, and he was able to control a lot of the team fights late. The damage output that he was able to put out there on Corki, which obviously we know the numbers that Corki can get to, was absurd. He was a huge presence for them. Him and Lost were the huge mega carries for them. Revenge doing a lot of good engages on the Gnar. Kenvi has one of his more, pleasant games of the split. I'm not going to say he was phenomenal in this, but one of his better games of the split here on Viego. Honestly, just a good win for Immortals. Everybody on this team looking a lot better than they have pretty much at any point in the season so far. As for Cloud9, pretty much a disaster for them. Like, this is as bad as it could go. Jensen's going to get my dud of the game. He actually had a really bad week in general, even in the game that they won earlier this week. He wasn't particularly good against TSM, and, he wasn't particularly good in this one either. He was just irrelevant. Like I said, Azir into Corki is a really bad matchup, but at the same time, you still got to do something. I think this was probably the least impactful I've seen an Azir in a game in a very long time. Very similar to what I was talking about with contracts on CLG earlier, just a couple games ago, where I'm going to penalize you if you sit around and do absolutely, nothing all game. I'm trying not to curse on this channel. Absolutely nothing all game. Jensen did nothing all game. Like, there's really no other way to put it. This is a 4v5. Like, he was non-existent. He did not exist for C9. Even with Berserker getting a little bit of gold here, it didn't matter. Blabber was behind, Fudge was behind, and Jensen was so far behind that Corki was just able to take over the entire game. So, yeah, I mean, outlook-wise, like, I don't want to stress this too much, but this is a good look for Immortals. Like, I'm not going to overreact. I'm not going to sit here and say, like, oh, all of Immortals' troubles are gone. But I don't know, like, with this roster, right? Like, with what you would expect this roster to be, PoE and Ignar are one of the most famous duos in Western League of Legends history. Lost is someone who I think has shown a lot of improvement. Kenvi is a hyper prospect. Revenge has his ups and downs, but has his ups, right? Like, this shouldn't be the BDS of the LCS. And I think that there is a chance that this kind of starts a little bit of a resurgence for them in the terms of maybe they're not, like, no-brainer number 10 getting perfect game. I'm not saying that they're a playoff team. I'm not saying they're top 8 or anything like that. They're still 2-7. Let's not forget that. But at the end of the day, maybe they're not, like, a 1-17 team by the end of the split. You know what I mean? Like, maybe they do have some level of life in them, and I think this is a good way to show that. As for Cloud9, I think they are definitely going to walk away from this disappointed that they weren't able to pick up a win here. But they're definitely starting to show the cracks in the system. Jensen had a really bad week this week, and obviously I talked about that when he signed with Cloud9, where I think a lot of people were forgetting just how up and down last year was for Jensen. People were really like, I can't believe this guy doesn't have a roster in spring. He was honestly, like, at best, probably like the 5th or 6th best mid laner in 2021. And he's come back and he's probably fallen, like, relatively close to that again here so far in this split. They definitely are going to need better from him if they want to be an actual Worlds contender here. Obviously, only the top 3 in LCS make it to Worlds, so if they want to be one of the top 3 teams, they're going to need better from him, and they're going to need more consistency from their jungle. Obviously, the Kindred pick, up and down. I get it, you want to flex the Gragas because Blabber's one of the best Gragases in North America, but he's also a phenomenal Kindred player. Those are his 2 champions, but I'm just not sure that's the pick you want to go to. You're going to need Blabber to be a little bit more active, and that just wasn't able to happen in this one. So even with your bot lane, I think playing all right, not perfect, but all right in a losing matchup, you're definitely not going to walk away from this feeling confident, and you definitely have a lot of things that I think you're going to need to take into next week to improve upon in order for you to feel comfortable about this team even pushing for a world spot. That's going to bring us to our final game here of Week 4 LCS action. And we ended the week with a matchup between Golden Guardians and Dignitas. Golden Guardians is able to pick up the win here. A very, very fun draft. I think that's really going to be the big takeaway that a lot of people have from this game, is that Golden Guardians, with one of the more interesting drafts I've seen pretty much in any region all year long. This is like the quadruple flex draft, and I love it. You've got the Aurelia. So who's going top? Well, it could be the Aurelia, could be the Wukong, could be the Sejuani, right? Who's going jungle? Well, it could be the Wukong, obviously. Could be the Sejuani as well. Who could go mid? Well, it could be Swain, could be Aurelia, could be Seraphine as well. Who's the AD carry? Could be Seraphine, could be Swain. Who's the support? I don't know. It could be Seraphine, could be Swain, could be Sejuani. Like, the amount of options that this draft gave Golden Guardians was genuinely unbelievable. It's one of the more fun drafts that I've seen pretty much in any region all year long, and they definitely paid off for them because they were dominant here. Seraphine is just such a generally strong pick, in my opinion, that I'm surprised other regions and other teams just aren't abusing more right now, because I really do think that Seraphine is really a difficult thing to deal with right now. Obviously, her weakness is that she's killable, like she can die pretty quickly, but if she gets her shit off, especially in a team fight, like you just win the fight. And so, yeah, I mean, you get that here. 6A gets to play the Seraphine, and he basically runs the game. Any team fight that he is a part of is immediately won by Golden Guardians because that ultimate and that zone control that Seraphine offers this team is nuts. You have so much engage here with the Wukong, with the Sejuani, even partially here with the Aurelia. Like, there's so much good here. 6A is going to get my player of the game here for those Seraphine plays, but at the same time, Anero really is the player of the game here. He was really phenomenal in draft, and this was a lot of fun. Ole played really well on the Sejuani. Want to give him a big shout out for that. Ole kind of been the pioneer for playing a lot of weird shit so far this split in the support position, and I'm here for it. We've seen the Mundo now. We've seen the Sejuani. I want to see more of that stuff. More of the crazy shit, because teams, especially North American teams, I think maybe this is less so globally, but North American teams are just not ready to play against it. Like, even the good ones, they are very good at playing against the things that they know how to play against. Give them crazy shit like this, and they struggle. They struggle a lot. And that's not to say this game was perfect for Golden Guardians. Licorice certainly had his problems in the top lane here on Aurelia, dying a few times more than needed. Blaze Olive definitely had some times where he was inting for no reason. But at the end of the day, does it really matter when you get a win? When you come away with this and you win, and your team fights are clean, and you're still doing all right. Like, I think at the end of the day, even if there were a few mistakes for Golden Guardians, they're going to be very happy with this outcome. As for Dignitas, blah, they got a lead early and they lost it. I mean, that's the Dignitas way at this point. They're not a good team. In my opinion, they're the least talented team in the LCS. They have the least upside, I think, of pretty much anybody. River's going to get my dud of the game here. He has, like, pretty underratedly been, like, awful so far this split. I think you could make a true argument that River, maybe outside of, like, I don't know, Kenvi, has been, like, the most actively, like, detrimental to his team of anybody in the LCS so far this split. He has been really, really bad. Picks the Xinjiao here with the Lucian Nami lane, and that is just, like, asking to lose the game against Seraphine, because you're just going to get outscaled into oblivion. Like, where's the scaling on this team? Where's the damage going to be late game? I just have no freaking clue what the plan is here. I mean, not only did you get completely bamboozled in draft by Golden Guardians, but your draft itself sucks. Like, it's a bad draft. Like, I really have nothing else to say. You have to win this game before 10 minutes, and we all know that Dignitas can't do that. So I don't really get it. Not a good draft from them. Blue continued to play bad. The bot lane is whatever, right? Like, Dignitas just isn't a good team. There's really not a lot to say. Outlook-wise, like, they're blah. Like, they don't have a lot of win conditions. The best player on their team this year has probably been Biofrost. It's not like you can carry through him. You would have wanted that to be River, but he started off summer being genuinely bad. Blue has not been very good. Neo has not been very good. Gamsu is not a carry. He doesn't play like one, at least. So I don't know. I don't really know what the upside for that. I don't really know where to go with this Dignitas team. Definitely some roster changes are probably going to be needed. Your academy team's a lot better than this. You could probably call some people up. As for Golden Guardians, okay, you had a really great draft. That's awesome. You did it against Dignitas. That's great. I'd love to see more of this, but I want to see it against good teams. Obviously, you got kind of blown out earlier this week against Team Liquid because of a really shitty early game. You had a pretty shitty early game in this one, too. But your draft saved you. Let's see this against teams that are more in your district. I want to see this against FlyQuest. I want to see this against CLG. Those are the games that I really want to see this team start to win. And then I'm going to start feeling a lot more confident about their opportunities. Not to say that they're a bad team, but they have a lot to prove to me to prove that they're not, just another team that can beat up on Dignitas, which we've seen really isn't that hard to do. So, yeah, shout out to the draft here. It was really, really great. But at the end of the day, beating Dignitas is still beating Dignitas, and I'm going to need to see more before I start to believe that you are one of these genius drafting teams that is just going to make a lot of teams pay for not paying attention to you in pregame scouting. And that is going to do it for my Week 4 LCS overview and analysis of all 10 games across those 2 days. Up on the screen right now, you're going to see the updated LCS standings. Any ties will just be broken alphabetically. The first column will be my personal power rankings, 1 to 10 for those teams, and the second column will be how that has changed from last week to this week. So let's go over who has risen, who has fallen, and where you guys might be reasonably upset. Let's talk about TL jumping 100 Thieves. I just have more faith in TL. 100 Thieves getting blown out by FlyQuest was very concerning for me. They bounced back later in the week, but it's still a concerning loss. Like, this is still something that I don't want to see. At the end of the day, TL was able to beat up a Golden Guardians team that at least shows some level of fight, and yeah, they got beaten up by EG, and they definitely have their problems in the bottom lane, but I don't know. At the end of the day, I think I still trust them right now more than I trust 100 Thieves, but those for me are your top 3 teams, still the teams that I would expect to go to Worlds. Your other risers and fallers, Dignitas falling down to 10, which means TSM and Immortals leapfrogging them. Some people are going to be shocked that I don't have Immortals at 9, but at the end of the day, it really is just about the fact that I think both teams are really bad, but I can more clearly see a world where Immortals figures it out than where Dignitas figures it out, right? At the end of the day, if I don't see a world in which Dignitas isn't a bottom 2 team at the absolute best, right? I don't think they make top 8. I do see a world in which Immortals figures it out, and Power People and Ignar get back together, and Lost continues to grow, and Kenvi can unlock his shit, right? Like, that exists. Well, I don't know if that's possible. Like, it's the fact that they're at 9, like, should show that. It's not like I really firmly believe that that is something that is going to happen. At the end of the day, I think it's more possible that that happens than Dignitas suddenly just clicks and figures it out, especially with this roster. But my player of the week for this week, I actually had a little bit of a tough choice here, but for me, it is going to go to Danny on Evil Geniuses. I thought he was really, really phenomenal, especially in that game against Team Liquid. He was really, really good. So Danny, he's continued to grow, continued to bounce off of an MSI where I think a lot of people were kind of disappointed with how he played. He's bounced back here in summer and been really, really solid for EG. He's going to get my Week 4 player of the week. And my dud of the week in Week 4, again, another relatively tough decision, but for me, it's going to go to Blue on Dignitas. He was just really not good again this week. He continues, in my opinion, to look like the worst mid laner in the region. And there's not a lot of upside that team continues to show. I don't think he's capable of carrying. I think you realistically could have given this to River on Dignitas as well. Both of them had pretty bad weeks, but for me, Blue was just a little bit less impactful. But yeah, that is going to do it. If you guys enjoyed, please go ahead and leave a like. If you can't tell, I'm definitely a little out of breath after recording for about 2.5, 3 hours. Definitely took quite a few breaks here. If you guys enjoyed the video, it really would mean a lot if you left a like, because obviously this one's getting a little bit tough to make with COVID, so it would really mean a lot if you guys showed your support there. Let me know what you guys' game of the week was, your player of the week, your dud of the week, all that fun stuff. You know I love chatting it up with you guys down in the comment section below. But with that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.